Welcome back to another episode of Suits Intake. My name is Domenico Crincoli, and I'm here alongside my co-host, Anthony Crincoli. Anthony, say what's up.
What's up, guys? Welcome back. Hope you missed us because we missed you.
Indeed we did. Let's get right into it. Let's get right into the nitty-gritty. On this episode of Suits Intakes, talk about Kyler Murray's contract. Kyler Murray, my quarterback, just signed a big-time long-term extension with the Arizona Cardinals. We're going to do a little deep dive into that, what that means for the Arizona Cardinals moving forward. Is this a good contract? Is this a good move? We'll get into it. Next, we're going to talk about Deshaun Watson, kind of like the big headline news of the sports world this past few weeks. We're going to talk about Deshaun Watson's extended suspension, what that means for the Cleveland Browns quarterback room moving forward, and then overall, was this the right move by the NFL? Next, we'll talk about Kevin Durant, because how could we not have an episode in which we talk about Kevin Durant and the downfall of the Brooklyn Nets? What a beautiful sight that is. And then finally, we're going to wrap up the pod with just talking about the Yankees, a little bit of a slump. It's going to be a little bit of a rough episode for Anthony here, if I'm going to be honest, because I'm going to talk about two of his teams kind of falling.
Yeah, and you're lucky it's only preseason, because we'd probably be talking about all three right now if it weren't.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's get right into it. Kyler Murray's contract. Kyler Murray signed a 5-year, $230 million contract extension with the Arizona Cardinals, including a $29 million signing bonus, $160 million guaranteed. It's a huge contract. Anthony, what do you think about it?
You know, I've heard mixed takes on this. You know, I think at one point this season, many people thought Kyler was a guy deserving of such a big payout. You know, towards the end of the season, so specifically the collapse in the playoffs, where he really didn't show maturity like that many people would want a franchise quarterback to show. Those question marks did appear. Do we give a guy like this that much money? Is he really the answer going forward? Because you're giving a guy like this contract. You think he's going to be the cornerstone piece of your franchise for the next 5 years or so, given maybe a further extension after that. But you're making a huge commitment to this guy, regardless. I am in favor of the deal. I know, like I said, there were question marks towards the end of the season about his maturity, about his ability to lead this team. I just don't see the Arizona Cardinals having another viable option at the quarterback position to win a Super Bowl or to be in a position to be a Super Bowl contender than Kyler Murray. I think Kyler Murray is the best option at quarterback for them going forward, because you're not the Rams. You don't have a guy like Matthew Stafford who's readily available and he's like a plug-in guy who could make you a legit contender for the Super Bowl. Do you settle for a guy like a Matt Ryan or someone else who made a big move this offseason, and you hope to get one of these low-hanging fruit veterans trying to make one last push? I don't think so. I think Kyler Murray does give you that explosiveness. If you think Cliff Kingsbury is your guy, he's the quarterback that you need in that offense. And like I said, I just don't think if the Cardinals are going to win a Super Bowl or be in a Super Bowl in the next 5 to 10 years, Kyler Murray is the quarterback of that Cardinals team. That's what I feel. And the front office obviously feels the same way, and they gave him the money to do that. I just don't think going into the draft, potentially getting a guy, the whole, we say it all the time, rookie deals, they can be fantastic for building teams because of how important the position is and how cheap you get them in comparison to guys who are getting paid towards the prime of their careers. I don't think that's the best route here. You're a team that has a window. A lot of guys are aging veterans on this team. You're in a win now mode. I think I had no problem with this deal, honestly. And 5 years from now, it might not even look that bad with how revenue and salary caps are progressing. So I don't think it's a bad deal.
Just a few points I want to point out about that last statement you just made. In terms of Kyler Murray, in terms of getting that low-hanging fruit veteran, Arizona Cardinals already did that. You saw what happened. They tried to do it with Kevin Cobb. Look how that turned out. They did it with Carson Palmer. Turned out pretty well for them, I would say.
Yeah, I would say that was a success.
It's difficult to hit on old veterans that leave their teams and try to compete for that one last push. Because not only are they declining in talent every year that you have them, they're also expensive. They're not cheap guys to go after and get, whereas you go get the rookie quarterback, it's a cheaper contract. It may not be as good, but it allows you to build up a defense, build up a lot of offensive weapons around him, and kind of give him that option, that check down to kind of go out there and be a steady quarterback.
I just want to add to the point, that's the one end. I also said go through the draft. This year's second time going to a young quarterback. You did draft Josh Rosen. You did put a lot of eggs in that basket. That didn't pan out. So there's to show I would say you hit gold at Carson Palmer because no one thought he'd bounce back like he did with Arizona. I think you struck gold with Kyler Murray because I think he's been a pretty legitimate, people argue he's top 15, top 10 in the league as a quarterback. But you also missed on guys like, Kevin Cobb, you brought out a veteran that way, Josh Rosen, you went through the draft another way. So it's like you're flipping a coin when it comes to either approach. I think when you have a guy like this who is young, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't pay him the money. Because if you don't, someone else will. And if you chose not to pay him the money, the other option is just, a lot of uncertainty. So I don't think that's necessarily a bad move.
I would agree, especially when you talk about the contract. A lot of times I think about Patrick Mahomes and his contract, the amount of money when he signed. It's like, oh, it's going to be a huge, massive deal. But I think in 5 years, or 10 years when that contract is about to expire, you're going to see guys signing for almost double what he's getting. And that's just the way that money works in the NFL. I think one large contract at the time was when he signed it, Joe Flacco signed a huge contract, and everyone's like, oh my goodness, this contract's huge. And now you look at it, and it's like, all right, it's always like the next guy is going to one-up the last guy.
Kirk Cousins had a huge contract that 1 year, too. I mean,
Well, you look at Lamar Jackson, too. Like, Lamar Jackson came out and said that the Ravens came out and said that the floor is Kyler Murray's contract.
The floor is the roof.
The floor is Kyler Murray's contract.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not... It's nothing wrong with saying that. I'm saying Lamar Jackson right now has proven more than Kyler Murray has.
Yeah, there's an MVP under his belt.
Exactly. But just to show you the value of the quarterback position, the Arizona Cardinals kind of did well, I would say, getting this contract done somewhat early. He still has 2 years left on his rookie deal. You're able to get it done before those contracts expire. You didn't have to go through the whole Dak Prescott progression where you have to franchise tag and then try to figure out a contract later on, and that even worked out for Dallas, the way they went around his contract. Because, I mean, if he were to sign a contract now, I'm sure he's going to say, look what Kyler got. I have done more for the Dallas Cowboys than Kyler's done for the Arizona Cardinals, and look at the money he's got. I don't know. It's just an interesting discussion. I think when, overall, you look at the Arizona Cardinals, this is probably one of the best franchise quarterbacks that they've drafted in quite some time, just from... Arizona Cardinals have a poor track record when it comes to just drafting in general, and they've always seemed to be that team that brings in the guys like last leg Kurt Warner, last leg Carson Palmer. Let's see if we can bring Kevin Cobb in. Let's see if we can bring Derek Anderson in. Let's see if we can bring this name in, and it always turns out to be either they're really good or they're really bad.
Yeah,
and. Shout out to the Arizona Cardinals for figuring out that they needed to get off Josh Rosen when they did. I wasn't a huge fan of the move at the time, drafting Kyler Murray. I would much rather have Nick Bosa at the time just because I was in love with Nick Bosa. I was in love with defense. I thought Nick Bosa was the real deal, and I wanted to see what Josh Rosen would have done in year 2. But looking back at it now, I was completely wrong, and I'm okay to say that. But I don't think there's much to say about this contract. I think in terms of the Arizona Cardinals, they need to get it done. In terms of Kyler Murray, I guess he's happy now. I know there was issues with the study clause, which I didn't really think was a big deal. I think everyone was kind of hyping that up to be more than what it really was. And it just, again, headlines, people like to talk about nonsense, and I think that was complete nonsense. And it is what it is. Am I concerned that Kyler Murray is a big-time gamer?
Part of FaZe Clan.
I mean, I can understand why that it can be concerning because it's like, all right, your quarterback's not serious about football if he's streaming Call of Duty during the season. But it's like all these guys, look right now, they're all playing Madden. all these NFL players. I know it's a preseason, but still, you're in training camp.
Yeah.
And like it's like I don't have a problem with that because you go to any level of sports, high school, college, even before that, you talk about like the kids are playing. They're playing Xbox. You work a 9 to 5 job, you go home and you play Xbox, you watch TV. Like that doesn't really bother me. I think it gets to the extreme where there can be an extreme that players do reach, like the streaming on Twitch every night or like post football game, like, all right, let's go like right on stream, and it's like, all right, I don't know how I feel about that, but then again, like, who cares?
I mean, at that point, it's like everyone's trying to build their own brand, trying to be bigger than the team and bigger than the league.
As they should. NFL's lifespan is 5 years. You get hurt once, you're done.
I think
get that money while you can.
We got to a point, I think, like with the NIT, you kind of see like everyone's trying to, really grow their brands and.
As they should. As they 100% should.
Yeah, so I think that's the wave going forward with that. In terms of that, I also don't really see an issue with it. The only issue I do have is, if they really feel like he's not studying film, and we saw like he kind of regressed throughout this season. I don't know. It's kind of interesting that you do give the guy so much money. I know I'm kind of like contradicting myself to an extent, but it's like if you do have questions about his ability to, act mature, which is, a key characteristic of someone you want to be in charge of your franchise. It's interesting that you give him such a huge deal. I mean, we saw guys like Jamarcus Russell who were, one of the biggest flops in sports history. He even says it himself. He wants to be the biggest flop ever. Don't know why, but his
name lives on. He wants the name to live on.
Exactly. But it was like there's famous stories with him. Like he would return blank disc to his coach and say, yeah, I watched the film this week. And it's like that's obviously a reason his work ethic kind of dropped him out of the league. I know Kyler, I don't think he's necessarily to that, extreme.
Oh, Kyler's a baller. I think
he's a baller.
Kyler Murray is a baller. And I don't care what anyone has to say. I think a lot of times people say Kyler Murray's overrated. He's not this. He's not that. Kyler Murray is
he can be a tad overrated.
Kyler Murray is a straight up baller. And what without Kyler Murray, the Arizona Cardinals are done. And in the blink of an eye, if Kyler Murray goes down, that team does not compete. I don't care who's on that team. You watch the Arizona Cardinals game after game after game. The plays that Kyler Murray makes are some of the best plays in the NFL. And that's just point blank, period. And I don't care what anyone else has to say. A lot of the quarterbacks, if they were throwing the Arizona Cardinals, wouldn't be able to compete as well as Kyler Murray competes for the Arizona Cardinals.
I don't know. I mean,
I do know because I've watched Arizona Cardinals games forever. I see the way Kyler Murray plays. When he's at his best, Kyler Murray is a baller. When he's at his worst, that's another thing we have to talk about. Kyler Murray at his worst. Consistency is an issue, but that's a known issue that you know when you're signing the contract, which is why I don't hate the 5-year deal. I don't hate the 5-year deal. The 5-year deal is a long-term contract. It could have been longer. We have guys like Pat Mahomes who have longer contracts. Yeah, but I think Pat Mahomes, when it comes to that, it's like you know what he is.
I mean, I would argue in that case though with Pat Mahomes, he kind of screwed himself over signing such a large deal. I mean, yeah, he gets the guaranteed $400 million.
Yes,
but it's like we just said before. Like I think in 3 years, Kyler's contract isn't going to look that bad. Like right now, Dak's contract doesn't look that bad. We thought it was ridiculous at the time.
We look at Kyler Murray; his contract only kicks in in 2 years.
Yeah,
he still has 2 years left on the rookie contract, exactly. And then he hits the 5 years. So we're talking about 7 years left of Kyler Murray under contract.
Yeah,
I believe he's entering 25, so he'll be like 32, 33 by the time he gets out of that contract, based on when the birthday is.
And then you see,
and it's like, okay, like you'll know what you have at the end of this contract. And if it doesn't work out, so what? Mm-hmm. So what? It's a shot you have to take. You can't let this guy walk. At the end of the day, you can't let him walk. And not only that, you can't, while he's under this inconsistent, quote-unquote, inconsistent quarterback, what if Kyler Murray goes out next year after Lamar Jackson signs his contract and wins MVP without a contract?
I mean, not only that, Deshaun Watson's contract is insane too. So you have other guys setting precedent. Like
that's what I'm saying. But like, the longer you wait, the more money you're going to have to spend. Unless it's the complete opposite. Which why would you bank on your player playing worse? That's what I feel. Yeah, that's what the Dallas Cowboys think. We're banking on Dak Prescott playing worse by franchise tagging him.
Yeah.
Why else wouldn't you sign your quarterback to a long-term extension?
You're just delaying the inevitable. And like
the value of the quarterback market goes up consistent. The value of every contract every single year goes up consistently and on a exponential path.
And you can hate. Let's say you hate Kyler Murray. Like there are guys we know that we speak to.
Everyone hates Kyler Murray. I don't think Kyler Murray is probably one of the most hated players in the NFL.
And people think he's not worth the money,
Many people, I think majority of the people.
A lot of people think that, but you can tell me with a straight face that if the Cardinals didn't sign him to that contract and he hit the open market, he wouldn't get that from 15 teams in the NFL.
It's just hilarious to me, especially in the New York market, where you talk about like these fans that are like, "Oh, I'm a Giants fan, I'm a Jets fan, Kyler Murray's trash." And it's like
they would offer him that contract tomorrow if they had the option to.
Is Kyler Murray better than Daniel Jones? Yes. Is Kyler Murray better than Zach Wilson? Yes. Next conversation.
Despite his phenomenal offseason.
Moving on. Anyway, that's what I'm saying, though. You look at the NFL rosters, a majority of the NFL teams would offer a contract to Kyler Murray. It's like we were talking about Kevin Durant.
Well,
it's like how many teams in the NFL would inquire about Kyler Murray being available?
It's the whole argument of this guy's a top X player in whatever league. It's like you can only say that about so many guys. So it's like if you think Kyler Murray, many people say Kyler Murray is a fringe top 10 player in the NFL, a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. That means there's 20 teams probably looking to acquire him if he's available.
Yeah, I think I don't think he's in the top 10 yet, but I think he definitely has the potential to get up there.
Yeah.
Just because of his ability, his throwing ability complements his running ability so well, being that dual threat quarterback. Again, I think it's a smart idea because of the concern, the threat that, hey, maybe Kyler Murray wins an MVP, or maybe he does make it into the Pro Bowl and has a playoff win.
You see,
it's like you have 2 years left of Kyler Murray's career. It's like you're banking on Kyler Murray to play worse than he does now. That makes no sense to me.
I think where the hate stems from is people keep hearing this is his year. He's going to be an MVP candidate, and he never finishes in the upper echelons of the NFL. Come season end, and it happens.
If he wasn't banged up last year, they could have made a case. Arizona Cardinals on an insane run. They were on an insane run, and I knew they were going to fall apart. When we did our midseason predictions, I was the only one that was like, I've watched Arizona Cardinals games all my life, and I know this team does not compete in the long term. It's like the team that's like, all right, let's try to fall apart this year, and it's going to be every single year. And it's going to be interesting to see how they compete this year because they have a pretty difficult schedule coming up. And they're going to be without DeAndre Hopkins for the first part of the season. And it's going to be tough. It's going to be especially tough with Kyler because you lose Christian Kirk, you lose D-Hop. You do bring in Hollywood, but it's like, I don't know. It's going to be tough. And
I've been on the record saying that I like that trade. I think the Hollywood trade is a good move.
You have to compete.
I mean, yes, the A.J. Brown stuff in retrospect made it look worse. But at the time, in a vacuum, I still am a fan of the
whole idea of the A.J. Brown one was, did you want to pay A.J. Brown that money? And I would have, but I could see why other teams wouldn't. So you got the Hollywood Brown under 2 years.
And I believe he got it.
And then
there was another pick involved in one of the trades that I was a fan of Arizona. I don't think they gave up a lot to get someone who could be a very good number 2 receiver behind D-Hop when he comes back off the suspension.
Well, it's not. Yeah, it's like you have to keep. Like, especially at the time, it was like, oh, Kyler's unhappy, and Hollywood is Kyler's guy. Hollywood and CD are Kyler's boys.
Hollywood was in Arizona during 10 minutes of the trade.
You're not getting CD, so you know what? Go out and get Hollywood, and let's go Hollywood, baby. But yeah, Hollywood Brown knew about the trade basically before draft night, so that's why he was mid-flight when the news broke, which is a fire by Bidwell going out and getting those guys and flying them in. He did with J.J. Watt. He did with Hollywood. That's just super sick. That's super dope. I'm a huge fan of that, and I'm excited for what's coming up for the Arizona Cardinals and Kyler Murray. I think if he really wants to live up to the contract, I think now is the time, man. You want to prove that you're not a bum, you're not overrated, you're not overpaid. Go out there and throw some deep balls to Hollywood Brown, maybe a fantasy sleeper Hollywood Brown. Mm-hmm. I think those boys are going to go out and compete in that air raid offense. I'm super, super excited to see what Kyler Murray can do this upcoming season.
It should be interesting. I mean, you did have a great start to your season last year. You have Kyler back, at full strength, ideally. Yes, you don't have D-Hop. You do have some other weapons behind him now. I mean, we'll see. Which division do you play this year?
A lot of them. We're playing the Chiefs around game 1, and that's all I'm focused on right now.
You're on the team?
Remember the fan base? It's like being a part of the team at this point.
You know what's crazy? You're more a part of the Green Bay Packers franchise than you are the Arizona Cardinals.
It's crazy when you think about it, right? The partial owner.
Shout out to Joe for the one time.
Let's move on. So we talked about Kyler Murray. Guy signed a huge extension. Let's talk about another guy that signed a huge extension, Deshaun Watson. Originally suspended 6 games. NFL said, let's appeal it. Officially came on the decision to suspend him 11 games. This comes after the Cleveland Browns kind of had an insane offseason, which they acquired Deshaun Watson and then also shipped out Baker Mayfield. Now, without Deshaun Watson playing the first 11 games, you look at that quarterback depth chart. Jacoby Brissett is in line to be the starting quarterback. You also have Joshua Dobbs, and you also have Josh Rosen. Those are the 3 quarterbacks that make up your quarterback room. So before we talk about the replacements for Deshaun Watson, let's talk about that suspension. Anthony, just quick thoughts on the initial suspension, the appeal, and the final suspension.
All right, so a few things. They did have a third-party arbiter in charge of dealing out the initial suspension, which I believe was 6 games before they increased it to 11.
It was 6 after the original.
That, I think, did cause a lot of outcry. You see guys like Calvin Ridley. He got he got a full year suspension.
Full year, yes.
For a completely separate, no violence. It was gambling related, betting on his team while he was away from betting on NFL games while he was away from his team. Mm-hmm. In that case, you're making it seem like, gambling and sports betting, something that the NFL actively promotes on a regular basis, is more frowned upon than alleged sexual assault. So that's, an issue in of itself. Then you have guys on PEDs get suspended, 4-6 games of the season. It's like, okay, so we're equating, dozens of alleged cases to, performance enhancing drugs. Okay, so I see there's issues there. I just find it interesting because if you're going to decide to give him a suspension or not, right? Mm-hmm. You're acting under the assumption that he either did it or didn't do it.
Yes.
So if you think he didn't do it, he shouldn't get any games because he's an innocent person.
Agreed.
So that's 0 games.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going on the opposite spectrum of this,
yes,
you're assuming that he is guilty of at least one, if not multiple, of the accusations against him. In that case, the NFL is saying that we settled for 11 games. I don't think it makes sense to say he's partially guilty or partially not, because there really isn't a gray area in this. He's either guilty of what he was accused of or not guilty at all.
Yes.
To say that, we're going to settle at 11 games means that the NFL acted under the assumption that he was guilty of these alleged crimes, these alleged accusations, and thought it only warranted 11 games. I think it's just an interesting approach to take by the NFL because it has a poor reputation when it comes to how it reacts and treats, violence specifically against women, the whole Ray Rice situation and other incidents like that. I feel like many fans were looking to see him get a 1-year suspension at the very minimum, and for them to have settled when they could have easily given him 16 plus games, I think it puts a bad taste in many people's mouths. And he's made comments subsequent to this ruling that didn't make him seem any better about the situation. So I not a huge fan of the suspension. I thought personally it should have been more, because either you think he's innocent, which is 0 games, or you act under the impression that he's guilty, which should have been more than 11 games. So I think it's one of the two. I think having we're trying to please everyone, which is what they ended up trying to do, turned away pretty much everyone in the process.
I would agree in terms of your thought process, whether it's all in or all out behavior in terms of whether he did it or didn't do it. And I'm not really here to talk about I think he did it or didn't do it. I just think that if you're going off the basis that he did it, then I agree a minimum of a year suspension when you look at Calvin Ridley would be just for the situation. I think what really fascinated me the most, saying that he either did it or he didn't do it, and we're going off the basis that he did do it, and then he comes out and apologizes to women that were offended by his actions. It's okay, you basically said you're guilty.
Yeah, because if you're an innocent person, you wouldn't feel the need to apologize for one. Again, these are all
Yes.
allegations. These are all alleged. But I feel like personally, if you're an innocent person, you want to feel the need to apologize. And if anything, you would just say, I'm not this kind of person, which he originally said, and then he said another statement that contradicted himself.
I mean, we're going off the basis that he's guilty. I think that it should have been longer, and I think that's really all there is to say about the situation.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the quarterback depth chart and the quarterback room moving forward, there's rumors now that are the Browns the suitors to land Jimmy Garoppolo.
Mm-hmm.
And it just would be hilarious that you're like, oh, let's move Baker Mayfield to Carolina, and then we're going to bring in Jimmy G to be the starter for 11 games.
Mm-hmm. It's just interesting to me because I think the Browns really, at the moment, I think they really poorly ran the franchise this offseason. I think you devalued Baker because you made all these comments about his maturity, and you waited for the quarterback market to die down when teams already filled or got a guy that they are comfortable with riding into the season. So you trade him for peanuts. I think you end up giving, in the former number 1 overall pick.
You got a couple picks, but it's like nothing back for what you once got. And it's just like,
now you got to make another move where you're going to have to give him more capital to get a guy like Jimmy G. I mean, I did hear rumblings that they kind of feel comfortable rocking with Jacoby Brissett.
It's interesting, though, because Jacoby Brissett's not a bad backup quarterback. I mean, he's had success in a lot of places that he's landed in. I just think it would be funny how if you were to bring in Jimmy Garoppolo, it would be Jimmy Garoppolo, Jacoby Brissett back again together as the two kind of replacement quarterbacks that backed up Tom Brady when he was suspended those first 4 games for Deflategate. Both of those quarterbacks did have huge success in those 4 games, went undefeated in those 4 games.
And this Browns roster is loaded. I mean, if you had even a halfway decent quarterback on your roster playing, you have all the weapons in the world on offense, and you have all the guys on defense to make a solid push to the Super Bowl. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily I think a guy like Jacoby Brissett could... I mean, okay, in a vacuum, I think he could be a great spot starter in case your starting quarterback were to go down, especially with this kind of roster. But, 11 games is a lot of season. I mean, that's more than half the season right there. For him to say, okay, you know what, we can probably go, I don't know, you want him to probably go 5-6. I feel like that's kind of his peak. That's it's the most you're going to get out of him. Expecting him to go 5-6, I feel like could be a tall order from someone like that. And if you go 4-7, 3-8, Watson comes back and you're expecting him to play at a fraction of what he played in Houston, you're still looking at a pretty tough hill to climb just to make the playoffs with a 3-7 record, a 3-8 record.
I'm just not. You're saying all the weapons in the world on offense. I'm not a huge fan of this offense, really at all.
I mean, you got Coop, you got Chubb, you got Kareem Hunt, who recently requested a trade.
That's what I'm saying. You have Chubb and Hunt, and then you have Amari Cooper. You have Donovan Peoples-Jones, who's a solid wide receiver. I wouldn't say he's great. David Bell is your third wide receiver 3. You have David Njoku, who's your tight end, so not terrible there. But it's I'm not a huge, I'm not saying you could throw any quarterback in there and they'll have success. You have to have a quarterback that can sling the football. And I do believe that Baker Mayfield is a better quarterback than Jacoby Brissett, and I don't think I'm a crazy man to say that. And I think the Browns kind of played themselves for waiting this long. They didn't have to wait. If they really wanted to compete this year and they thought that Deshaun Watson was going to get suspended, they could have kept Baker Mayfield, as miserable as he would have been. Let him play out those 11 games, and let's see what he does. And if he does have success, it is what it is. You let him walk at the end of the year if he wants to walk. But it's you can't not have, you know what I'm saying? You can't not have the safety valve.
Yeah, I think.
And it's okay, now you're going to trade him, bring in a few assets, and if you acquire Jimmy G, you may be potentially paying that contract off, and the offseason in general would just be a major L. Because you gave up so many assets. Yes, you will have Deshaun Watson for the future. Yes.
But
I'm thinking short term right now. I'm thinking next season.
No,
they're going to be worse than last year.
Let's think long term too. We're acting under the let's put all of these accusations about Watson aside.
He will play next year. Yes,
he was a top 5 quarterback. Arguably
at his peak,
he was an MVP caliber quarterback at his absolute peak.
I don't know about.
He's a top 5 quarterback in the NFL.
I don't know.
The last time he played,
he's not top 5.
Arguably top 5.
He's not top 5 now, though.
I'm saying the last time he played, he was arguably top 5.
I don't even know if he was arguably top 5 when he last played.
Okay, but let's say
that's the thing. I think Deshaun Watson's. I think people are forgetting. Hey, Deshaun Watson's a good quarterback. Let's not.
He's a very good quarterback.
I don't think he's in that like top tier quarterback.
Well, I'm not saying he's Aaron Rodgers, or I'm not saying he's Tom Brady or even Pat Mahomes.
Mm-hmm.
But
that's what I'm saying.
Are we saying he could be on the same level as like a Josh Allen?
At this point, I don't think so.
Let's say he's a slight step below like a Josh Allen. Let's say he's like 7 to 6 in the league, right?
Okay.
We're assuming that you're getting a 7th to 6th best quarterback in the NFL after playing, not playing a year and a half. When's the last time he played? 2020.
Man hasn't played a year and a half.
Yeah, so we're assuming that he's coming off an injury. We're assuming he's just going to come into the situation, have the mental strength to, if he's innocent, regardless, to have to deal with all the bantering, all the jeers from the crowd going forward and play at this absolute peak of, 7th or 6th best quarterback in the NFL. He's actually getting top 5 in the NFL money. You're kind of pigeonholing yourself there if he's not the guy. And a lot of that money is guaranteed. I know I said before with Kyler, it was a more guaranteed, like I was okay with the situation, but the Browns gave the guy so much guaranteed money when I don't think anyone else in the NFL would have done the same. It's just, it's crazy that, like, I don't know. I think it was a very interesting move. I wasn't necessarily a fan of it. I think Deshaun Watson at his best is better than Baker Mayfield at his best.
Agreed, 100%. And
I think at his best, Deshaun Watson makes his team a better team and a more of a threat to win a Super Bowl than Baker Mayfield would. But a lot of question marks. There's so many question marks. I mentioned with Kyler, double, triple it when it comes to Deshaun Watson. So I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting, even when he comes back. There are many people who think he's going to be a dud and absolutely suck. I think that's wishful thinking for them.
Yeah, I know.
Based on their beliefs, but I don't think he's going to be a dud. I just have question marks if he's going to be a top 10 quarterback in the NFL coming back. And you have a lot of money tied to him for an extended period of time. If he's not an elite level quarterback, you're wasting your money. Because he's going to miss half the season this year. He could have missed the entire season this year, and he would have gotten 99% of his contract this year, pretty much. I mean, that's insane.
They folded. I mean, I don't know if they folded. They're just banking on his talent when he plays being back to what it once was. And not only that, it's just, I don't know exactly what they're doing. Like, we thought the Browns were back. The Browns were turning this new leaf. I wouldn't even say they're back. They're just turning a new leaf. And now it's like you look at them, look at the past offseason, you let OBJ walk, or you cut OBJ midseason, and then he had success with the Rams. You cut Jarvis Landry. You bring in Amari Cooper. You traded Baker Mayfield. You brought in Deshaun Watson. Like, there were a lot of just transactions, but I don't feel as though the team got better.
I don't think it necessarily got better, but I think the parts that were good about this team didn't get worse. I mean, their defense is still at an elite level, and I think they could ride their defense to, some pretty solid heights.
I just think it's going to be tough because they're in such a tough division, man.
They are.
Like, you still have the Bengals that are going to be competing. You have Lamar Jackson who's going to be competing with the Ravens. The Steelers are probably going to be the worst team in this division, but, I mean, that's nothing against them. It's just the way their team's built.
To think that the Ravens were the worst team in this division last year is actually insane. So, like, it shows you how deep that division is, how hard it is to be in the AFC North. So it's going to be a dogfight. A dogfight from the dog pound, one may say.
That's all. I mean, that's all I really have to say on the topic.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Cleveland Browns are probably the most interesting team this offseason by far, given the all, just everything, all the moves.
It's another huge chance for Jacoby Brissett, though.
Yeah.
Like, it's a huge opportunity. You start 11 games in the NFL consecutively. Yeah. It's like you go from backup, if you have a pretty solid run, maybe there's another contract there at the end of the season for you. It's like, it's a big chance, and then let's say the dude does run the table, goes 10-1. There's a conversation to be made.
Do you ride the hot hand or you let Deshaun Watson play?
And I think the answer 100% is do you let Deshaun Watson play.
I mean, I think the first game he comes back is in Houston too, right?
It is a Houston game. So that should be an automatic win.
I don't know. They have something going down in Houston.
Davis Mills.
Yeah, there's something cooking in there.
No, Davis Mills is a great quarterback. I just think they're not cooking this year. Anyway, let's move on. We got to talk about Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant, sweepstakes is not heating up. I think it would be the exact opposite. I think it's kind of cooling down. Every team in the NBA inquired about him, as they should. They're doing their due diligence. Kevin Durant, asking price is way too high. You look, I think the Hawks recently had one really, really solid offer.
Memphis reached out today too.
I think the Hawks were including John Collins and DeAndre Hunter, as well as a first-round pick, maybe a couple other players in there, but that was the basis of that trade. I think that was a solid trade. I think the Celtics trading Jaylen Brown in any package was a trade that the Nets should have accepted if they had a Jaylen Brown and a couple picks and you threw in a couple role players. I think that was the best trade you were going to get. And I don't think that trade's still on the table. I don't think Kevin Durant moves to Boston. But we didn't even talk about that when the Kevin Durant to Boston sweepstakes was like crazy. Like, oh, it's almost a done deal. Like you're going to get Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, a couple picks, and I don't really know necessarily if that was the case. If you were going to get both Jaylen Brown and Marcus Smart, I think if you're the Boston Celtics, entirely way too much to give up for Kevin Durant. I do think a Jaylen Brown Kevin Durant swap makes the Boston Celtics better, just in terms of Kevin Durant being a better player than Jaylen Brown. Kevin Durant's the type of player that elevates your team from not only making the finals, but being able to compete and win the NBA finals. So I'm not, yes, I would hate to see Jaylen Brown leave, but having Kevin Durant in Boston would be absolutely insane. Having Jason Tatum as your second best player would be incredible. And okay, people are going to make the argument, oh, he was the second best player on the team last year. Be quiet. Be quiet.
He had a fractured hand.
That is recent news. That is recent news. So everyone, I mean, Jason Tatum, another player that's just overhated. It's not about my favorite teams and having just like extremely hated players. It's like a common trend I find. Anyway, let's talk about Kevin Durant though. What's next for Kevin Durant? What's next for the Brooklyn Nets? Anthony, hit it.
Well, I think the Brooklyn Nets are optimistic, or at least, still in the camp that they can keep Kevin Durant, make him happy. Because let's be honest, I think the best chance for the Nets to be in a finals and win a finals, and I'll argue the next 20 years, would be having Kevin Durant on this roster as their best player. I mean, in what world are you going to get a guy as great as Kevin Durant is in the next 10, 15 years on your roster? It's not going to happen.
Nope.
So I think your best bet, if you're the Brooklyn Nets, you want to compete. Joe Tsai, the owner of the Nets, has made it clear that he wants to win a championship. He'll do whatever it takes to win a championship. If you want to win, you need to make Kevin Durant happy. And Kevin Durant recently made his demands that he wants, it's either him or Steve Nash and Sean Marks. Joe Tsai has sided with the front office. He put his foot down. And I find that very interesting because that's the first time in the last 4 years with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving that the front office put their foot down and, said no to these guys. I think it's interesting. Kevin Durant recently, there were rumors that he's going to retire before he plays for the Nets again.
Which he quickly turned down.
He turned down. But I think Kevin Durant is starting to lose leverage here. What's he going to do? Is he going to sit out? I don't think he's going to sit out.
I think he's going to end up playing for the Brooklyn Nets.
I think he's going to end up playing too.
As the days go on, I see that Kyrie Irving's basically going to play out his Brooklyn Nets contract.
Well, the Nets made it clear today they want to keep Kyrie Irving. They don't want him to move.
I think a part of that is just keeping Kevin Durant also somewhat happy or somewhat content. Like, okay, we have Kyrie Irving, so if we can't get a trade offer, you could just run it back. And not only that, you have Ben Simmons who wants to play, and maybe this is all just smoke. And nothing. There is really no issues with the Brooklyn Nets and Kevin Durant, but I don't think so. I think Kevin Durant really did want out. I think Kyrie Irving really does want out. But I just think they sit down, they sit back, and they look at the NBA. They see it as a business, and you see that there's just no move to be made.
If they were
let me just finish this last point. Rudy Gobert ruined the trade market for the Brooklyn Nets.
Completely agree.
He really did. You look at it. There's no team in the NBA that's going to be willing to give up the amount of players and the amount of picks that the Brooklyn Nets want. If the Brooklyn Nets, just one last point before I let you finish. Let's just take the Boston Celtics, for example. If you trade Jaylen Brown, all-star player, and you want Marcus Smart, defensive player of the year, and you want 5, 6, 7 first-round picks. And the argument to be made is it's Kevin Durant. It's the best player you could possibly ever acquire in a trade ever in NBA history. And I would say yes. But if you told me that Rudy Gobert is 5 first-round picks, it's like, you're the Brooklyn Nets, you have to ask for more.
You have to ask for
more. But the teams don't have the assets to acquire Kevin Durant for the asking price that they want. No team in the NBA is going to give up 5, 6, 7 first-round picks, and you're going to want 3, 4, 5 young players along with that. It's absurd. It's absurd. And you look at where we're talking about Kevin Durant. Look at Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving wants to go to L.A. What is L.A. going to give you? What is L.A. going to give you? A first-round pick in Russell Westbrook? Is that really crazy when the guy's under contract? Especially now if he wants to play, like as he came out and said that he wants to play. But again, Kyrie Irving switches his mind every day. You have to run it back. Yeah. You have to run it back. You have to at least bring Kyrie Irving back. And then if Kevin Durant wants to sit, let him sit. There's really nothing else. He's under contract. What is he going to sit, 3 years?
That's what I'm saying. If he does sit, he's retiring. Pretty much. Because
he won't get paid.
If I were the front office of the Nets, I would be as petty as possible and make him sit if he's not going to play.
I mean, if I'm on the Brooklyn Nets and he said choose between Steve Nash and Sean Marks and him, I would fire Steve Nash and Sean Marks in a heartbeat. The only thing I find funny is it's like Sean Marks did bring in Kevin Durant, and it's like he chose Steve Nash. So it's like I wouldn't necessarily say it's Sean Marks' fault because a lot of the moves that were made because of Kevin Durant, not in spite of Kevin Durant. And it's just interesting.
I'm a big Sean Marks guy. I feel like he's done as much as he could with what he was given.
He built the team from the ground up.
He built the team from the ground up, like from the absolute depths of hell this team was built from, and I give him credit for that. I think I kind of have to applaud, Joe Tsai for taking the side of the front office here, because I think the front office has literally given anything that KD and even Kyrie has wanted for the last 3 years on a silver platter, regardless of the situation. Kyrie going MIA, Kyrie not playing, all of this KD nonsense when he put a super team together specifically for him. Like, there are guys in this roster, like DeAndre Jordan was getting playing time over Jared Allen. Kenny Atkinson lost his job over it. Like, things like this where you really go back and it's like, what would happen right now if we had Jared Allen? What if Jared Allen got more minutes and became an all-star before the James Harden trade?
Not only that, I feel like Sean Marks, his biggest downfall was listening to the superstars and not his own conscience. I don't know if he necessarily wanted to acquire James Harden. I don't know if that was a move that was a Sean Marks move. I think that when the day you guys traded for the day that the Brooklyn Nets traded for James Harden was kind of like the downfall of this franchise, where I thought it would be the exact opposite. I was in love with James Harden. I was in love with James Harden's play. I was in love with the James Harden trade, and it's just like, wow.
It backfired.
That was probably the big one. I think in terms of NBA history, probably the biggest disappointment in recent memory.
Yeah, because I wouldn't say it was a bad trade.
No, it wasn't a bad trade at all.
It was a disappointing trade.
It was just a point. Like, yeah, I mean, you look at it and you're like, wow. Like, you have KD, Kyrie, James Harden, and now it's like, all right, you guys didn't compete for a ring, didn't even get close to a finals, and you have nothing to show for it. And it's just really, really, really disappointing. And I don't know where the Brooklyn Nets go from here. And I think we say the same thing every podcast. Like, where the Brooklyn Nets go from here? We don't know.
Well, I'll say this. 2 things. I think, business standpoint, you're looking at, if you're in the shoes of Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, I think you are fully aware that the best business decision is to stay in a large market. The best market you can stay in, given the situation, is Brooklyn, because you're in New York. Otherwise, the only teams that have a package that are worth your talent are going to be a team like, Memphis. You mentioned Atlanta before, potentially. Like, Oklahoma City has a good package they can give. Let's throw in New Orleans because they have good packages too. You're really going to be okay leaving the New York market to go to one of these other teams? Absolutely not. Who in the world would want to go from New York City to Memphis as a business decision? No one. So I think from that standpoint, and also from the fact that you want so much, I think you said the Rudy Gobert trade might have hurt the Nets. I think it might have helped the Nets, because I think at the end of the day, you can't get enough for Kevin Durant or even Kyrie Irving for that matter. And if that's the case, they're going to have to stay on this roster. And
the way you look at it.
I think the best case scenario for the Brooklyn Nets, chemistry aside, is to run it back with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. Because let's say you move Kyrie or you move Kevin Durant, you're going to get like 3 or 4 very good players, 5 very good players, and you're going to get a bunch of draft capital. What's end up going to happen is, best case scenario, you're going to the 2019 Nets, be a very exciting young team, be a 7th and 8th seed, possibly upset an upper seed, make a 7-game series out of it, and get bounced. And that's going to be absolutely
sounds like the Brooklyn Nets prior to Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving coming along.
That's exactly the point. And you're just hoping that in this lottery system of an NBA draft, you pick a stud, an absolute superstar, and you watch him develop and blossom in the next 5 to 10 years of his career and bring you a championship. Am I going to wait 20 years before the Nets win a championship, or do I try to do everything I can in my power now to get Kevin Durant happy enough to get this all to work? Because keep in mind, last season, or 2 seasons ago, if his foot was half an inch shorter, I would argue that the Nets were making the NBA Finals that year. If they beat the Milwaukee Bucks, I think they walk into the NBA Finals.
And they win the NBA Finals.
I would say, yeah, it's a very good argument they win the NBA Finals as well.
And this entire script is different.
Yeah, because James Harden probably stays. Kyrie Irving doesn't have any issues.
Well, not only that, you have a ring. You ship these guys off. Who cares?
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing is, like, you have a bad taste in your mouth because you had 3 of the best players in NBA history on one team, and you have nothing to show for it.
I know.
And if you trade these guys for Russ Westbrook, first-round pick, Kevin Durant would get moved for, I don't even know a package. You name XYZ package, couple young players, a bunch of picks. At the end of the day, picks don't mean anything if you can't draft. Again, who cares? Because it's always going to be like it's the Darren Williams, Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, Brook Lopez, Jared Wallace team, 100 times worse, 1,000,000 times worse. Because like at least when you had like that team, you're like, okay, Paul Pierce, KG were old. Like at the end of the day, you had excuses. This team had no excuse in the slightest. You had easily the opportunity to win a ring 2 years ago, and then last year, I mean, they should have competed, man. Like they weren't even competitive in that Boston Celtics series, and it's just terrible. It's like shameful almost. Like, you look at the team and you're like, what? The roster on paper was a solid team.
It was a phenomenal team, not even solid.
I don't know. It's really just disappointing at the end of the day, and that's all I really have to say about it.
All I'm saying is run it back. That's your best chance of winning the finals. Have Kevin Durant and Kyrie play a full season together. For the love of God, please. That's all I'm asking for. I think so many problems would be solved if Kyrie Irving just suited up and played games for the Nets. That's literally it.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the solution here. That's all we're going to say about the slumping New York team. I guess we could talk about another slumping New York team, the New York Yankees. 5-14 in the last 19. Subway Series does start tonight. Max Scherzer is on the mound.
Yankees are up, actually.
Yeah, I was about to say, you beat me to it. Man, the Yankees lost a number of series now. I think it was like the longest losing streak in terms of series in like over almost 20 years. Definitely over 15. And are you concerned as a New York Yankee fan of the slump going into last couple weeks of the MLB season?
I have mixed feelings, to be completely honest, because I think the MLB season has multiple seasons within it, if that makes sense, given how long the season is.
Any sport, yes, continue.
Yeah, but it's like 162 games. It's a marathon. It's not a race, and I think that it's not a sprint. The marathon's also a race. Gotta correct myself, but at first I was like, this is good because the Yankees are getting in their slump now. It's mid-July, early August. You're gonna work out all the kinks now. Come late August, September, October, we shouldn't have these issues. These issues have been persisting for 3 weeks. Yeah, you said there were 5 in the last 19. That's just in the month of August. You go back since the All-Star break. Their record isn't much better. This slump has been for almost a month now. And it's like, I just don't know where to start. I mean, the lineup has absolutely fallen apart. I think they're really missing guys like Giancarlo Stanton, who should hopefully be back by Thursday or Friday, from what I read.
Thursday, yes.
So I think not having Stan in this lineup, there's no one really to fear outside of Judge from a pitching standpoint. I think, Rizzo does provide you some value. I'm a big Rizzo guy, but
Benintendi's done absolutely.
Benintendi's he was an all-star in Kansas City. He's been a joke pretty much. So he got traded.
Joey Gallo is performing not only great field play, but just great personality.
It's just it sucks, but I think wait until DJ came back. He was out for part of this stretch, so you're seeing him like today. He got the single to put them up. He's been putting the ball in play, so hopefully he provides some life to this lineup too. I think adding Stan back to this lineup does provide them a spark. But it's just like there are so many opportunities to turn this around. Like I thought the Josh Donaldson grand slam to walk it off the other day was going to be a pivotal moment. Like that's going to wake him up. Mm-hmm. You see Oswaldo Cabrera be like an absolute lightning in a bottle for this team. The amount of energy he's bringing, like he's been fantastic, showing so much, so many great flashes of what he can be. Still nothing. It's just like you need guys to step up. Judge is still being a stud. I mean, he's actually he hasn't hit a home run in a little bit, but he's still playing at an MVP level. He's the best player in baseball this year. It's just like, I don't know. You need other guys around him to step up. And like the worst part is like the lineup just isn't hitting. I mean, the pitching hasn't been terrible. Like Cortez pitched a gem last night. He's having a fantastic season still. But like, I don't know. You can't lose when your pitcher gets up 3 runs as the New York Yankees. You have a lineup where you're the Bronx Bombers. I mean, just put runs on the board. It just gets me frustrated. I think maybe it's hard to say this team overachieved the first half of the season because it's just you were up by like 20 games at one point to lead the AL East. To say that you're overachieving, I think it's kind of you're overstating it there. I mean, I feel like this team was very, very good in the first half of the season, and for them to just like fall apart like this, I just don't know what to put my finger on.
It's just interesting because I feel like this is also something that you could easily have seen coming. I feel like the Yankees often do this. Like they often have this mid-season or just slump in their season, whether it be beginning, middle, end. But they were just too on fire. And I think it's kind of like correcting. It's almost like a market correction. The New York Yankees are kind of falling back down to earth. And I think it definitely is a little concerning because you see other teams kind of starting to streak as the season comes to an end, and you definitely want to have that hot streak heading into the postseason. So I think definitely now is a better time to kind of have that slump rather than a couple of weeks from now as we're trying to head into postseason play. And not only that, when you get into postseason play, if you are stuck playing one of those games where it's win or go home and you're kind of going through a slump, it's not a fun time. It's not a fun time. So I think there's hope for this New York Yankees team. I do believe that they have the bats in their lineup to compete on a nightly basis with anyone hitting wise. I think pitching wise, they do have a couple pitchers that come in there. I know we mentioned Nasty Nestor that can go and just kind of sling that ball in there. So yeah, I'm not entirely too concerned of this team right now. I think you give me a week or two and you're like, okay, if this streak continues, they lose the Subway series, the 2-game series against the Mets, they lose a couple other series, then I think it's definitely time to be very, very concerned. It's just like, where does the blame fall on? Does it fall on Boone? Does it fall on the players? Does it fall on management? Who does the blame fall on? Because it's like the roster is there to compete. They had a huge lead in the AL, and now it's like, I guess it's Boone. Like Boone, I know came out a lot of energy. If you listen to the audio version, air quotes on around the a lot of energy. I guess he was high. I don't know. I guess he was hyped up. It didn't really look too crazy to me. Everyone was.
He slammed us.
Yeah, that's what everyone was hyping it up about how vocal he was. I just don't know what exactly. I guess the blame ends up on him.
I think he has had some very questionable decisions made as a coach. I mean, some of the lineups he's trotted out there have been pretty mediocre. I mean, Aaron Hicks is getting regular playing time right now. That's not it's not translating to winning baseball. You have guys like, even when you have guys that are. I think John Boy Media actually made an interesting point this morning. You take guys that are struggling out of the lineup. You have a starting lineup in with guys that you want to get looks. Maybe they'll have a fresher. They'll have a better approach at the plate, and you end up taking these guys out for the guys that are struggling later in the innings. And it's like, if you have more confidence in these guys in more clutch situations, why are they not starting against the number one pitcher on the other team? It's like you have these like weird decisions that are being made, and it's like make it make sense. A lot of questionable moves have been made. You have guys that are in the minors that should be in the majors. Marinaccio is a stud. He was in the minors for weeks after we saw him, the Judge walk-off. It doesn't make sense. There are some questionable decisions being made. Well, that's bigger than Boone, right? That's also the front office determining who goes up and down the system. But I don't know if it's a statistics thing. We have guys that are righty and lefty who aren't playing well instead of guys who are just, playing well from both sides, regardless of who's pitching to them. We'll see. I think a lot of, like you said, it's, like I said before, it's a long season. Like you said before, it's good to get these kinks out now. I think, give it a week or two. We have Stan back in the lineup, hopefully by the end of the week. If things continue after he's in the lineup, then I think there's more of a cause for concern. But until then,
I mean, the Yankees are really bad. I think
they're the worst team in baseball.
There's no other way around it. I wouldn't go that far.
Over the last 2 weeks, they're the worst team in baseball.
Yeah, but they still have exciting times here and there. But again, I understand. Like, it's like they had to have gone through a slump after being so hot, and I don't know. There's one thing between being in a slump and being in a really bad spot, and I think they're getting on that borderline, like really, really bad spot because they're losing so much.
They're losing so much, and they're losing to teams that they should be beating. Like the Rays are one of the worst teams in baseball. They dropped a series to them. Boston's been one of the worst teams in baseball. They dropped a series to them. They were losing games to Kansas City. I mean, there are teams that they were not playing tough teams. I mean, Toronto was about.
That's the thing, like you went 5-14 your last 19, and those series that you played weren't really challenging series. So
Also, the toughest
makes you
team
a little
was
concerned when you go into like the playoffs moving forward. What are you going to face the top teams in the MLB? Is this team just a bunch of frauds?
And that's concerning because. Like at one point, this was the best team since 2001 when they made the World Series, or like 1999 when they won the World Series, whatever. So it's like, it's just it's tough. Definitely a season of highs and lows. I think as the Yankees are very fortunate they got off to such a hot start like they did, that they're still last time I checked 7 games in front of the AL East. So 7 games is still a decent has some decent wiggle room. So. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
I mean, that's all you can really do right now is wait and see, because there's nothing else for the Yankees. I mean, the only thing you could do else for them is play for them, and you can't do that. But this podcast is on the reaching on the hour mark. By the time I probably plug the socials, we'll be above an hour. So let's wrap this up.
Wait, I guess before we wrap it up, November 12th, Dominic, what's happening?
It's funny because when you plan out the podcast, you go through like these stages, like, all right, like, what do you want to talk about? Like, let's talk about a little NFL, a little NBA, like, we'll throw a little baseball talk in there every now and then, former baseball players ourselves. And they said, oh, why don't we talk about St. Peter's visiting The Rock to play Seton Hall basketball? And I said, you know what? It wasn't even a thought in my mind, man. It's like a bye week in the NFL when you look at that schedule, baby.
You're downplaying this. This is going to be an electric matchup. We have Shaheen Holloway back at home at Seton Hall University. The Rock is going to be rocking as the Peacocks showed what the world what Peacocks can do last March. They come in this November 12th, Prudential Center, visiting the Seton Hall Pirates. It's the Battle of New Jersey. I mean, it's
we really gotta go.
America's team versus America's wannabe team.
I mean, what? I mean, what kind of statement was that?
I don't know. The Peacocks are America's team, and the Seton Hall.
The Peacocks were America's team.
Still are.
They're an afterthought now, dude. I don't want to break the news to you, but what's a peacock?
I I don't know.
I don't want to break that news to you.
Domenico.
When you guys show up to the Rock and you get the doors blown off you because you don't have a single player from that last year's team. I just want to let you know that I just be prepared because like I didn't want to bring it up on the podcast.
Hey, the name on the front is a hell of a lot more important than the name on the back.
Showing the world what peacocks can do.
Yeah.
Better show the world what great minds can do. In case you didn't know that Seton Hall slogan. Yeah. You set yourself up for that one. Boom.
You get a quality education at Seton Hall.
Anyway, I will be in attendance for that Seton Hall game. I'm sure Anthony will be in attendance for the Seton Hall SmackDown.
I honestly might lace
St.
up.
Peter's. Can you still play? I mean, are they still looking for players? I know the whole team transferred out.
I think I might sell COVID eligibility, honestly.
I mean, they might need players on that team after they all left the squad. Thought Shaheen couldn't.
I heard they're in the library just like doing like signups.
Really?
No, I'm fine.
No.
No, we got some transfers. We got some guys in. Juju's about to tear you guys up. I'm telling you right now. Juju's still on the team.
Good for him, honestly.
He was a stud during the March Madness. He had some nice
honestly,
games.
I think it was the team that Juju built, St. Peter's.
Honestly, yeah.
At this point, loyalty, as Kendrick Lamar once said.
100%.
But all right, let me wrap it up. If you're not following us on social media, add Suits and Takes on all the social media platforms. Click the link tree in our bio. It has all the links. I'm not going to go through all the craziness that is the internet, scary place that it is. Listen to all of our previous episodes on wherever you listen to your podcast. Once again, my name is Domenico Concoli. I'm here alongside Anthony Concoli, and this is Suits and Takes. We hope you enjoyed it. Have a good one.
Peace.
Cue up the music. Let's hit it.